Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Talking City podcast. My name's Simon Bajkowski, joined by Joe Bray across the Atlantic in Ohio now, is it?
It is, yeah. I'm struggling to to keep track myself, but yeah, it's the final leg of the journey. Arrived in Ohio yesterday, and it was lovely weather. And then about 9 or 10 at night, it just the heavens opened, and it's not really stopped since.
Well, it's getting it out of the way, isn't it, so that it doesn't happen during the game. Is that
I, d-
right? Or
I
or
don't know. I did ask the taxi driver last night. I was like, "Is this normal?" And he was like, "It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it goes all out." So, but yeah, Orlando was crazy because it was absolutely glorious before and after the game. And the only time there was rain or a thunderstorm was that sort of 90 minutes before the game that kept everyone up in the UK.
yes. Well, it was all worth it, we say.
I mean, it was fine for us. We just sat back in the press box and got a bit more food and enjoyed the view. But I'm sure you guys covering it at home and any fans watching were just rolling their eyes, thinking, "Oh no!" And they told us that if there's lightning within 8 miles of the stadium, they need to have a 30-minute free zone to be able to restart the game. So every time we saw a bit of lightning, we were like, oh, "Okay, the clock's restarted now." And then it was another hour for warm ups and stuff. So it was a long old wait.
Yes. Well, we shall start today's podcast with some very important news, much more important than weather, and that is that City have been charged by the Premier League. The news that a lot of fans from other clubs have been waiting for, but not necessarily what they were expecting. Would you like to fill us in?
Well, yeah, that was the sort of headline that one of us checked our phones and was like, "Oh my God, City are being charged by the Premier League," and we'd all gone out for some food. It was a day off in terms of no media activity, day after the game, and we thought, right, we filed our stuff in the morning, we can go and just get some lunch, and then we hear that City are being charged by the Premier League, and we're like, "Oh my God," and we're all scrambling around on our phones, and it turns out it's completely different to the 115. It's completely different to the legal action. It's over the last 2 years, I think 22 instances of late kickoffs and late restarts from City, and the fines have added up cumulatively from a warning to sort of 10,000 fines to, I think the biggest one was about 200, was it? But it totals just over £2 million, which is quite a lot of money over the last 2 seasons. And yeah, City have seemingly accepted it, and they're not saying anything because of that reason. Because they've, I mean, it's one of these where the facts do sort of speak for themselves. If they're late, if they're a minute or 2 minutes late, then they can't really argue. But yeah, it's interesting that it got to that point in terms of 2 years worth of late restarts to be able to be fined. So I'd be interested to know the timeline of when were they told that sort of thing.
Yeah, and also how long do the Premier League leave it before sort of announcing that they've fined? Do they say, right, we're going to fine you for 2 years, or
Mm-hmm.
what was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will?
I think Crystal Palace were fined last year for something similar, not on the same level, but for it to go back 2 years and it says there were warnings and that sort of thing. Yeah, why have you let it get to 2 years? I would imagine, I don't know, I would imagine that would be a little bit of a annoyance from City's point of view, but at the same time, you have 15 minutes to do your halftime team talk and do anything you need to do. And that's been the rule forever, hasn't it? So you should be able to stick to that. I found it interesting. One of them was the final day last season of against West Ham, and that was the longest of all the charges, if you will, that City
yeah,
came. I think almost 3 minutes. I mean, that one you probably do take a fine and just try and get an advantage, but it could also be a coincidence. It could be like, I don't know, someone was injured and they needed to get a bit of treatment and they were waiting for a substitution. I don't know, but
yeah.
it felt interesting that they need to beat Arsenal on the final day. They've got a lead in the bag and they wait just a minute or two to come out.
And are all of these sort of restarts for the second half, or are some of them?
I think the majority are kickoffs at the start of the game. So, I mean, it could be
Right.
something like the light shows that City put on. I've not actually
Yeah,
looked
yeah,
at the actual games and what the result was, for example, or what the circumstance was. But some are home, some are away. So it's not a case that all of them are just City have done a light show and they've come out late.
yeah.
It seems that I should have come into this, done a bit more research and looked at what happened on each of the 22
But,
instances. But
well, no, it kind of sums up how trivial it is that
yeah,
like no one really knows or is that bothered by it. It's just one of those kind of, one of the big gripes City fans have with UEFA is that they fine City more for being late on the pitch than they did other teams for racially abusing their players. It's kind of like,
yeah,
yes, timekeeping is important, but not not that high up on the list of important things. And especially not when you've gone out for lunch and you just want a quiet day. But
absolutely, yeah. The panic when someone piped up and said City had been charged by the Premier League or fined or whatever the wording
yeah,
was. It
yeah.
was a lot, especially when my laptop was back in my hotel, and that's a lesson. Don't go out without your laptop.
Yes, but yes, all is well, and City convicted cheats now. Now that they've paid the fines, and we'll see
I
what
thought it was
they.
interesting that they said the players and management have been reminded of their responsibilities. So whether that's just something that they have to say, but yeah, it
No,
might be interesting to see what Pep says about it. If anything, I'm not sure he will do, but he might
yeah.
do. We never know.
Can they remind them of the responsibilities in the mix zone as well? That'd be nice.
Yeah,
Uh,
get that on the charges.
yes, I think every club would be in the dock for that. So let's get on to the latest. And the latest, what has particularly caught my eye over recent days, has been this Alvarez and Man City situation, which seems to have sort of just got a bit of an edge to it that wasn't necessarily expecting. Alvarez, some comments came out from Alvarez saying that talking about frustration at not being involved in important games. And then, you were in the room when those comments were presented to Pep, and it was a pretty Pep answer, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we'd heard from Grealish, and he was speaking sort of emotionally about his struggles, and Pep had been asked on that, and there was a lot of Barcelona journalists in the room, so it was he was in quite a good mood, I thought, and then the question comes about Alvarez, and that mood changes quite quickly, and it was on the surface of it, the comments are, yeah, if he wants to think about it, come back to us and let us know. But the way it was delivered was, yeah, you have a think, Julian, you have a think, and when you've had a think, come and let us know, and we'll have a chat. And those are two very different sort of answers when you look at the context of how it was answered. He didn't seem too happy, and when it was put to him that he didn't play the big games, he didn't play the cup final or I can't remember. I think he came off the bench against Real Madrid, I think, didn't he? And
He had the last 30 minutes against Madrid, and he came off the bench in the cup final and missed
yeah,
two very good chances.
well, there's that as well. But yeah, he sort of he played number 10, he played number 9 when Haaland and De Bruyne were out, but when they came back, he was on the bench,
Yeah,
and that you can see why he would be annoyed at that.
yeah,
But he also played, I think, more than any other player last season in terms of appearances. So Pep was asked, he didn't play these big games, and Pep's response was, yeah, everyone wants to play the big games. He's not the only one. So there was not a lot of sympathy, I thought, from Guardiola. I mean, looking at there's a video of what Alvarez actually said. I think it's difficult to know with the translations, and it seemed a bit more laid back and just not as punchy as the quotes suggest. But he still
yeah,
said that he's not happy at starting the big games, and then he comes out and tries to clarify it. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens when they come back if they need to just clear the air and clarify things, because the thing is, if he wants to leave, it's the same as anyone. He can leave, but City need a replacement. But also, who's going to pay a significant amount of money for a player who's still got 4 years left on his contract? He's won literally everything there is to win in the game, and he's going to be worth a lot of money, and there's a month left of the transfer window. It feels like he's not going to get that move because nobody's spending any money this summer.
yeah. And I mean, Pep is obviously a master at getting a message across without necessarily kind of the message being evident in print or even broadcast to
Mhm.
some people. But what was interesting to me was not. So the full interview from Alvarez, the full original interview, was, like you say, much more complimentary and saying I'm very happy at City, and
Yeah.
it felt a bit more abstract. Like obviously anybody would be disappointed at not starting big games, but I'm really happy at City. So what was really interesting for me was then, Alvarez at the Olympics and was asked about Pep's comments and kind of doesn't use the opportunity to say, oh yeah, I said this and I'm really happy. He kind of uses it to
Yeah.
say, well, I've not said anything wrong. I
Yeah,
speak to my
exactly.
agent and it's what I do every year. And you sort of think, like,
You could have drawn a line there, but he's
yeah,
not.
he could have drawn a line and he didn't. And is he in a position to be doing that? Maybe. And maybe he wants to sort of let the message be known to other clubs that he is open, but sort of, has when Kevin De Bruyne says that about Saudi, as he has done, you're talking about a player who's sort of given everything to City and has 9 years of service under his belt. When Alvarez does it after 2 years where he's not done that much, you're sort of less. There's less credit in the bank for him to be saying these things. Alvarez, he's not on the US tour. He wouldn't have been on anyway because he was at the Copa America, but he's missing the start of the season because he wanted to play at the Olympics, and that's fine and that's good. But like, should you be kind of annoying people? You're annoying the people that pay your wages even more by coming out with these things. Um,
And Alvarez has played so much football over the last 2-3 years.
yeah,
He's going to need a rest because, as Guardiola says, there's a 12-month season now. He's not going to be available to City probably until after the September international break.
yeah,
So he's going to have to come back with, depending on Haaland's injury problems, but he's going to have to come back and fight his way in,
yeah. Well,
way behind everyone else.
that was the other thing. He sort of said, "Oh, I'll finish the Olympics, then I'll have some time off and talk to my agent." He thought the window will be closed by the time you're back at City. Like he's not going to be back anytime soon. So yeah, an interesting one to watch. I mean, Atletico are the main people who've been linked with him. PSG as well. Both of those clubs you would say would, in the right circumstances, have the money to spend on what City want. But but it's going to be interesting either way because either like he's never seen in Manchester again, or he comes back and has to work his way in and has to work his way in with, a manager and maybe a bunch of players who are sort of like, is that the right way to talk? I don't know.
I just know sitting in that room, Pep was not happy, and you can get that vibe. And he chooses the carrot and the stick with different players, but that was definitely you know exactly what I mean when I say this.
Yeah,
There was no ambiguity.
And you're talking about a guy who loves what Alvarez brings to the team. Like he's such a pet player, and he's had so much praise from him for filling in at 9 and 10 and sort of earning a place in the team in his own right. So it's more of an interesting situation than I thought it would be.
And as well, if we're saying Alvarez had the chance to draw a line under it, Pep didn't have to say that. And often he doesn't engage in these sort of rumours, but he chose to say something which was actually quite interesting.
Yeah. So we will wait for lines to be drawn, but lines are yet to be drawn. And also sort of a slightly more interesting situation as well because Erling Haaland came off with injury problems, did he, against Barcelona?
Yeah, well, he's come off at half time in the last two friendlies in New York. We asked him and he just said, it was pre-planned. So I think he played about 60, 70 minutes in the first game, scored first half in the second game and scored. He did actually score in the third game, but there was no goal line technology.
Yeah.
And the press box, by the way, my seat was exactly on the line. Even though it was way up, I was thinking that looks like it's gone in. And then they decided it didn't. And I did. I'm sidetracking here, but I did enjoy Pep still in a friendly going up and remonstrating to the referee all game, which could have been about that, could have been about anything else. But it's like Pep, it is a friendly. So he comes off again, and we're thinking, okay, that's twice in a row now. And Pep says Haaland has some niggles. They're not taking risks. It sounds precautionary because they don't want him to be out for 3 weeks or a month because they have no Julian Alvarez. They've got no, you need Erling Haaland for the start of the season. But again, it was interesting because Pep said sooner or later he's got to take the step to train and play minutes. So does that mean the ball's in Haaland's court? I mean, Pep's never going to say to a player who's reporting a sort of an injury that he's got to play. But that might be worth expanding on, I think, when we talk to Pep later, because yes, you don't want to miss Haaland, but also, are you unhappy with him? And I know Haaland, when we spoke to him, he was saying that, last season's injury, it still affected him. It still sort of stayed with him a little bit. And he was talking about fitness. And this was another Pep answer when we then put it to Pep. Pep was like, he doesn't need a rest throughout the season. He's had his rest all summer. The other players like Rodri need a rest. And yeah, it seems like there was a bit of I don't know whether there's anything going on there, but again, Pep didn't have to say that, and he did. So what do we draw from that?
Yeah, and he, as well, it's all very well saying, well, should Alvarez be doing what he's doing in his position, but City could even more do with keeping hold of Alvarez if Haaland isn't going to be kind of 100% nailed on for his minutes. The main other transfer bit is like, why haven't City signed a Rodri replacement? But a surprise new name for the hat appears to be Nico O'Reilly.
Yeah, he's had a very good pre-season. He started all 3 games. It's not been perfect, but he's also a 19-year-old who's never played in the first team before. He started the first game in sort of attacking midfield, got himself a sort of assist. I suppose it is technically assist, but a lot of it was helped by Haaland running over the ball. Hits the side netting. Second game, he's okay, more of a number 8, and then he's dropped back into number 6 alongside Kovacic, and he looks very good. And he pops up in the box and takes a very good ball from Guardiola and sends it back into the bottom corner. And I thought it was Oscar Bob because of the movement and the finish and the fact that it was so far away from the pitch.
And the hair, let's be honest.
And the hair. And I know Guardiola then made the point of saying Bob and O'Reilly look completely different because of the height, but from the 5th tier or whatever of the Camping World Stadium, I'm gonna allow myself the confusion. But it was O'Reilly, and he sort of popped up there, and I think he deserves the goal, and he's done well. And Guardiola is very, very happy with him, and says he's been impressed in training. He deserves the chance. He did say that when Rodri isn't there, O'Reilly is an option. I'm not sure that he'll throw him in a Premier League game, for example. I think he was very much helped by Kovacic being there, who is, he just showed again how good of a player he is. And I think, Kovacic likes having that player next to him if he's playing the sort of holding role. So they worked really well together, and that's the thing that Guardiola needs to do. He needs to find that plan B for Rodri, but O'Reilly has clearly made an impression. And when Guardiola sort of pauses and says, he's going to be a player, you sort of have to listen and take his word for it, because this is what we were saying at the start of the tour. It was Lewis 2 years ago, it was Bob last year. There is a chance as a youngster to make an impression, and it seems like O'Reilly might have done that this year, and I would expect that he starts tomorrow against Chelsea because he's been playing well. I'd say he's been doing a bit better than James McAtee in that midfield in terms of his performances and the impact he's been having. So, full credit to him. Whether he is a direct Rodri replacement, I don't think so, especially because we spoke to him and he said, I've never played that position before.
Yeah. Well, this is it. He's a 10, and if he's not a 10, he's an 8. And I suppose you could say, well, working backwards, you can be a 6, but it did feel quite...
He might follow Calvin Phillips and be a centre-back in the next game.
And then the Edison replacement they need, but I can't see him as a 6. Maybe, like you say, he might play some minutes there in the League Cup, but I'd rather, if he is getting minutes, he plays higher up the pitch. But the more important point which you make is that he's clearly impressed Pep a lot on this tour, and it takes some doing that. So yeah, I think he could be certainly want to stick around the first team, which is very nice.
He's also a really nice lad as well. He's
Yeah,
had a lot of injury problems, and I spoke to him after he scored his scorpion kick and 40-yard lob 2 seasons ago in the academy, and he just said, "Yeah, I saw the keeper off his line. And I thought I'd go for it." And for the scorpion kick, it's like, yeah, well, it was behind me, so it was the only way I could do it. And I'm thinking, you've just scored 2 of the best goals I've ever seen. And
yeah,
he's so laid back, and that probably helps. It's probably similar to Bob and Lewis. If you come to the first team, you've got to back yourself, but you can't be a diva in any way, and he's definitely not that.
yeah. It's sort of Cole Palmer vibes of just
Maybe
being
not that laid back, but
extraordinary talents on the pitch, but just like being like, yeah, just did
yeah.
that. You're like, oh, right, nobody else can do that. Yes, the last few transfer bits, because we love transfer news during the transfer window. Jan Kuto, is he off?
Well, I've just seen he's arrived in Dortmund, so you would expect so. But yeah, a loan agreed with a 30 million euro obligation to buy and a sell on. So it doesn't add to this summer's sort of budget, but
Yeah,
they did this last year with Howard, Bellis, and Doyle, and got a nice little boost at the start of the
yeah,
summer. So I make that about £25 million, about 20 million profit on a player who's never played for them. I think that's
yeah,
all right. I know he wanted to play for City, and there is the, you know, do you need a right back in the future? But he needs to play now. He's just got himself into the
yeah,
team of the year in La Liga, and he's clearly a good player. And I think Dortmund suit him from what we've seen of him.
yeah. Strong Pedro Porro comparisons, really, of like a
Yeah,
very, very good right back who looks certain to have a very good career, but just it's never fallen for him at City. And yeah, there's very little else going on. Is there's Jacob Wright was, someone said he was off to Peterborough. He's definitely not off to Peterborough. A loan would kind of make, I say a loan would make sense for him, but depends what's happening with Rodri cover, because you've got both him and Sissoko, haven't you? Sort of could provide some minutes. Callum Doyle expected to go off on loan once the tour.
yeah. I think Doyle is going to Norwich. Doyle,
Yeah,
by the way, came off the bench, and Lewandowski's running on goal, and he just sort of used his body and was really, really good when he came off and stopped Robert Lewandowski from scoring a couple of goals, which is quite good. I think he's been okay on tour. And yeah, Wright and Sissoko, I think Sissoko's been a bit better. There's talk of him maybe
yeah,
having a loan, but again, it's how do you cover Rodri? And I think that's going to be a theme of, we've seen a few different options. It depends on what players you have there, because you've not got most of your midfielders. I felt sorry for Wright missing that penalty, because when else is he going to have a chance
yeah. Well,
for City to score a penalty against Barcelona?
He's definitely a City player now. He doesn't score penalties. That's the formula. Right, we shall head to a break now, and then we will be back to talk a bit more in depth about things happening on the tour. And yeah, the last leg that is coming up. Hello and welcome back to the Talking City podcast. We have been talking through the first 3 games of the pre-season tour and all the news that is around that. And I just wanted to ask you, Joe, about obviously, you get press conferences and interviews and things on tour. City haven't had most of the players there, but they have had kind of 2 of the big 3 in Erling Haaland and Jack Grealish. Both of those have sat down for press conferences with the media. Obviously, a press conference with Erling Haaland is a very rare occurrence. So what is it like to be in that room when Erling Haaland sits down?
Well, he told us off for a start because he said hello and no one said hello back, and it felt a little bit, I don't want to say pantomime, but by the end when he got up and said goodbye, everyone knew the drill. But he is like that. I'm not sure he would have done that in his first press conference. I think this is just the 3rd one he's done in 2 years, one being his unveiling. I don't think it was as sort of bombastic as the first 2. because the first one was like, yeah, I'm here, I'm going to score all the goals. The second one was it Copenhagen last year,
Yeah.
where we were like, oh my God, we've not heard from him for ages. And it was really interesting. That happened to fall on one of my days off, which I was a bit annoyed at. So I was quite happy to be in that room there. I thought it was interesting what he was saying about sort of fitness and tiredness, and he was saying that he didn't really watch the Euros, but the bits that he did, he said the quality wasn't great because of the sort of the amount of games people have to play. But then when I followed up and said, is there too much football, he turned it back on me and says, what do you think? So he still plays the game and only answers what he wants to answer. And there was a question on, do you think Rodri should win the Ballon d'Or? And he will have his eyes on that, and he didn't particularly endorse Rodri. He didn't say he doesn't deserve it, but if he doesn't like a question, he will clam up, and that's the Haaland that we know. But it's different to interviewing someone else because he has that sort of presence and aura. And I did think it was interesting when he was talking about his injury, and I mentioned it before, but when he was saying that it still sort of affected him and stuck with him, and he hinted at maybe not being 100%, and then we've seen him have these niggles as well. But I mean, he scored 2 goals in 2 and should be 3 in 3. When O'Reilly scores, he's there at the back post waiting for a tap in, which he's got countless times for City. But at the same time, he's really happy for O'Reilly. He's not having a go. He's the first one on the scene to clap and support the goal. So I think in terms of his attitude, he is refreshed. He said he needed the break, and yeah, that was interesting. We'll have to wait a long time, I think, for the next Haaland press conference. But it was interesting the next day at the Yankee Stadium, he walked past in the mix zone, and as you know, we try our luck with everyone, and we said, Erland, you fancy a chat? And he was like, I spoke to you yesterday, I'm not speaking to you today. And then he just walks off, and I mean, he's just exchanged shirts with Zlatan, and he's I think in the first game he was joking with Peroni and saying, go on, interview him instead of me, he's more interesting. So he's clearly in a good mood on tour. He gets on with Grealish, he spent a lot of time with him. But yeah, we didn't get that first ever mix zone interview with Erling Haaland.
And I'm guessing that he is still the player that fans go most wild for.
Yes, yeah, especially on without the likes of De Bruyne and Foden. But I mean, when you're walking around to the games, even just around the cities, if you see a City shirt, it's got Haaland on the back, and he is the star. The occasional Foden or De Bruyne, but the majority are Haaland. And when they're selling the sort of knockoff shirts outside, it's got Haaland on the back, and he's the big one. I'd imagine there was some disappointment when he's gone off at half time in both of the games, because he's the one that they came to see. But I think I wrote my report in New York about everyone came to see Haaland, but they got another Norwegian superstar in Bob as well. So Oscar Bob is getting quite popular in terms of. I'm not sure it'll be on the shirts. One little bit, there was for the Barcelona game, I was in the press box, and all the Barcelona press were to my side, and they were just running through the City team and just comparing that they've got everyone. And it gets to Oscar Bob, and all of them in unison go, Oscar Bob. And just like repeated his name about 5 times, and he's even popular with the Spanish journalists.
Yes, yeah, I think his song will be sung a lot more this season. It's a very popular one, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you had Haaland in New York, and then in Orlando we get Jack Grealish speaking for the first time, really, after being left out of the England squad. And Grealish kind of normally as he can be as big, as bombastic as Haaland. What was he like on the back of such, personal disappointment this summer?
I mean, firstly, fair play to him for doing it. He didn't have to do that, but I think in hindsight, it was probably the best time to do it, because of the time difference. Yes, his comments got picked up, but he's said it now. He said his piece. They've not been completely widespread and analysed and dissected. It was a relatively small press conference, and he can just get it out of his system now and get on with it. From the start, he didn't sort of need easing in. He just said it was the most difficult sort of period of his football career, and he was heartbroken, and he couldn't watch the Euros, but it was everywhere, and he was disappointed. He said that he should have gone. He was very, very careful with his words, because when he said, yeah, I think I should have gone, he also said everyone who missed out by nature is going to say they should have gone. And they shouldn't be at the top if they don't think they should have gone.
Yeah.
There was a point where he said he's a better player than he was at Aston Villa, and then he moved to clarify that there was no disrespect meant to Aston Villa, and just sort of clarified what he meant as well. Because I think he's aware that especially his words, can get taken out of context. But yeah, as much as he's disappointed and feels that he was clear that he's not making excuses, he knows it's on him. It's interesting, at the end of the season, he was saying that he sort of knew that it was coming. He was looking at his rivals in the England squad and they were scoring all the goals and he was on the bench and he knew he needed to do something. So it's up to him. I think in the first 2 games, I don't think he'd done too much. He didn't do anything wrong, but he was just keeping possession and doing what he was asked to do. But you needed a sort of moment, and then the next day he comes out and he scores what I think was a very good goal made by Kovacic, but he still has a lot of work to do. And the reaction was just a sort of, he just threw his arms away in a sort of half fist pump, half like release of frustration and energy, and sort of have that, and then just walk back to his spot. But if he channels all that, I think he could be quite a good player this season. He knows that he's got to do what he did in the run up to the second season that he had at City, not the first or third. So yeah, I think it's over to him. And when you ask Pep's saying he's come back great. It's the Jack we know, but it's up to him. He's got to do it, and he's got to make my decision for me. I can't do anything. So I think, yeah, when we're talking about carrots and sticks and motivation, I think it's a tough love thing with Grealish.
Yeah, and I mean, Pep gives Grealish kind of a lot of love behind the scenes, but it's almost like a perfect sort of follow up to Grealish saying, "Yeah, I thought I should have gone." When Pep says, "Well, tough, don't matter, you didn't go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Prove everyone why you should have gone." And that kind of thinking. So yeah, and as you say, it was very interesting. Because you do have to back it up, that kind of celebration from Grealish after his goal, because he's another who hasn't really done a lot with his performances on tour, and then you can sort of say, well, I'm asked to play false nine, I'm asked to do this and that and the other, and it's like, it don't matter, just go and make an impact, and he did get that goal. So that was the Barcelona game. Was there anything else that took your eye from the Barcelona game?
The press box didn't have very good aircon in Orlando, which is known for being very hot, which I thought was a bit interesting. But yeah, I think it was. I think City were better. I think it was the best performance of the tour so far. Barcelona, it was the first game. They had a lot of young players as well. Pep keeps saying, every time the ball comes into our defence, we concede, but it is a very young defence.
Yeah.
And I mean, Calvin Phillips is there, and he had his best game of the tour. And Pep praised him and thanked him for playing there, but also said, when everything's around him, he loses the ball. When everything's in front of him and he can see everything, he's quite good, which is quite damning for someone who wants to be a defensive midfielder, who has to be aware of everything sort of in a 360-degree angle. So it was sort of a praise, but damning praise as well at the same time for Phillips. But we know he's not going to be a midfielder, a first-choice midfielder for City. He knows that there's a decision to be made. I think if he finds a club, he will be allowed to go. But also praise him a little bit, because he did play well against Barcelona in a position he's not really played before, and he did look good. So if we're going to be hammering him and saying he's not played well in the first couple of games or over the last 2 years, when he does play well, I think he deserves to be credited for that, even if the caveat is he's not going to be there for the rest of the season. He's probably 7th or 8th choice now in defensive midfield and centre back, which isn't a great position to be in.
Yes, yeah. So City are now on their 4th and final leg of the US tour, where they will play Enzo Maresca's Chelsea. Quite a nice line from Enzo Maresca recently, saying that because he's bald and comes from Pep's heritage, people think he's going to play Pep's football, but he doesn't. He just kind of loves it and tries to put a style on it. And yeah, City, of course, will play Chelsea in 3 weeks' time in the Premier League, their first Premier League game. But what can we expect from the game, and what can we expect on the site? What's going on around the game that we have on your final leg?
There's a massive open training session today at the Columbus Crew. So I think tickets for that have been reselling for hundreds of dollars, which is absurd, but will be interesting to see. See there, we're hearing from Pep and I believe Josko Gvardiol, but these things are obviously subject to change. And then yeah, it's the Columbus Crew Stadium is sort of purpose built in the last few years, and for the MLS, and I think they won the MLS sort of playoffs last season, and they're in their Champions League equivalent. So it's a big soccer city, but we're not playing there. We're playing at the Ohio Stadium, which is the college stadium, which has I think 100,000 capacity, which is going to be big, and it's going to be massive, and potentially City played in a stadium with a bigger capacity than 100, 105, maybe the new camp, but it's going to be a setting that is that they're not used to, and it sort of shows that you can sell out these. Well, I don't know if it's a sellout, but you can sell a lot of tickets in America for these games. Saying that, the taxi driver I had yesterday didn't know what was going on, so I think he was quite happy to know that he's got quite a few fares coming on Saturday night. But team news I think will depend on Haaland, won't it? Because you don't risk him. If there's any doubts, you don't risk him. You can put Micah Hamilton there. Grealish has played in the centre a little bit. You have the options of what to do. But yeah, we'll have to see what Guardiola says about that. I would imagine Phillips stays at centre back because he did quite well. Guardiola was there, having not really played at centre back for City, but it's just the way of the makeup of the personnel in defence that he's probably got to do that. Or does Callum Doyle play against Maresca, where he did very well under Maresca at Leicester last season? And I can't see too many changes because there aren't many changes to make. But yeah, it's a chance, probably maybe a chance for McAtee to put one last stamp on the tour and show what he can do. And Guardiola has sort of apologised to Rico Lewis that he's had to play him at right back because he would like to play him in midfield. Do you have a go at playing him in midfield and just give someone else the option of playing at right back? But then that didn't work when Sissoko played there in the second game against Milan. So you can see why Guardiola was a bit sort of hamstrung by his defensive options. But I think I'll be interested to know what you can learn from this tour from Guardiola. There's only so much you can implement because none of your players are here. So yeah, one more game. Interesting that it's against Chelsea who you're playing in 2 weeks. But if you ask Guardiola now, you won't win any game on tour, but you'll come back with no injuries. I think he'd take that even with the Haaland issue.
Yeah, and he'll tell us all in 3 months what he learned on the tour. So
yeah, when I ask him on tonight or tomorrow, he's not going to say a word, is he? But it'll pop up in a press conference before like Southampton away.
Yes, which kind of neatly rounds the podcast up with Pep saying things what he wants when he wants.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think we will wrap it up there. Because you need to get off and go and speak to Pep, and then we will be back probably sort of, I would say, slap bang in the middle of your jet lag, something like that. We'll try and aim for a really sweet spot.
I hate to break it to you, I've got some time off after this.
No,
2.5 weeks. So
we're getting you on the plane, I think, or at an airport. We'll find a way to get you. Don't worry.
Right.
We can
okay.
always
Never stops, does it?
No. Because we don't want to disappoint the listeners. And thank you to everyone who has listened. And please leave us a positive review if you liked it. And we will be back next week ahead of the Community Shield against big spending Manchester United.